Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's Planning Committee meeting. My name is Peter Richards, and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. Some housekeeping, if I may, to start with. So first of all, we're not expecting a fire alarm, so if one does go off, run. No, don't run. Follow us out to the car park next to the pub over the road. We will need to check your names off against the register that you came in with, just to make sure everyone's out of the building and safe. So please make sure you do that before you head off home. Mobile phones, if you could please turn them off, at the very least to silent. I appreciate sometimes there are emergencies, so at the very least, please turn them to silent. I would prefer if they were off. As long as they don't ruin the flow of the meeting, I'm perfectly happy for them to be around. We have a lot to get through, so let me start by giving some introductions. To my far right, we have Howard Allison, who is our Committee Services Representative. To my immediate right, we have Amy Shipley, who is our Solicitor. And our planners, in no particular order, are Alison Willers, Charlotte Dix, Malwina Idziak, and we have Emily Napier as our Planning Manager. Emily, I think you've got a statement to make.
Thank you, Chair. My role tonight is to provide impartial advice to committee members and to assist members in their decision-taking.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder for the members of the public as well, we are of course being live streamed and broadcasted and recorded, ready for YouTube, so if you want to watch this again at a later date, feel free to do that. So just bear that in mind if you would please. It is a meeting in public, it's not a public meeting, so only the people that register to speak will be permitted to do so. At the appropriate time, I'll call you forward to one of the microphones in front of you. The button on the right will make the microphone active. You can probably see I've got a red dot here, so you'll see that and you'll be able to speak as soon as that's on. You will have an allotted amount of time, which I'll tell you as and when you sit down. I will give you a 30-second warning before your time is up. The warning will be this, and then I'll stop you at the end of your time. Good. Right. Let's get into the agenda itself. So apologies. Do we have any apologies for absence, please, Howard?
Yes, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Crump, Councillor Parry, for whom Jennings is substituting, and Councillor Eden.
Thank you very much, and welcome, Councillor Jennings. Disclosures of interest as well, please, members. I'm going to kick us off, if I may. So the first item we have to listen to tonight, which is application reference 2103775 OUT. I'm sure members will recall in June last year, the Conservative group were provided with a dispensation around the contributions made towards the party by the applicant. We have had legal advice from our monitoring officer, who is here tonight, just to make sure that we cover this correctly. I'm going to read a quick statement that has been approved by him for you now. So I'm disclosing on behalf of myself, Councillor Kendall, Councillor Crump, Councillor Mills and Councillor Jennings that we all have a pecuniary interest in this agenda item. During the period of 2015 to 2019, the parent company of the applicant, who is Roscon Strategic Land, made a number of donations to the Conservative Party or directly to the two local Conservative Party branches, of which we are all members. The last of those donations were made nearly 4 years ago on the 6th of June 2019. In June 22, the monitoring officer granted us with a dispensation to determine a planning application from Roscon that was heard by the Planning Committee at its meeting on the 22nd of June of the same year. The dispensation was granted on the basis that, without it, the number of members prohibited from participating in the meeting on the 22nd of June would be so great a proportion of the committee as to impede the transaction of this business. The Monitor Officer's dispensation, which is published on the Council's website, also makes clear that the dispensation would have effect for a period of 4 years from the date of his decision, unless the parent company or one of its subsidiary companies made any further donations to the Conservative Party. I can confirm that no further donations have been made to the Conservative Party or either of the local Conservative branches since the 6th of June 2019, and I therefore believe that we are entitled to determine this application. As I say, that has been approved by the monitoring officer, so I'm comfortable that I will be able to sit, and I'm going to assume that the members that I've named are also comfortable to sit. Thank you very much. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you very much, Chair. That all sounds absolutely terrific. Fine. Should Councillor Harvey, unless I missed, should Councillor Harvey also be included in that dispensation?
Councillor Harvey and Councillor Forman were not appointed to the Planning Committee at the date at which the last donation was made, and therefore they were not part of that original dispensation. And again, I've had that confirmed to me by the monitoring officer. Okay, do we have any other disclosures? Councillor Harvey, please.
Item 5 on the agenda relating to Peddlers Garages. I am the ward member when that application was originally considered to grant that consent. I spoke as the ward member against that application, and therefore I will withdraw while that item is considered.
Understood. Thank you very much. Anyone else? I have one. So on application, so item 7, application 2300-121 FUL Primrose House in Snitterfield. I'm the ward member and I have registered to speak, so I will be removing myself from the table and I will hand over to the very capable hands of Councillor Kendall, who will chair the meeting for that item. Marvellous. Let's move to the minutes. Is everyone happy with the minutes as they are set out in our agenda pack? Lots of nods. Yeah, agreed. Lovely. I will sign those later. So we will then move to, in fact, before we do that, agenda item 5, which is application reference 2103935 Vary. That's Pettifer's Garages Limited in Shipston on Stour. We have no registered speakers, so we are in a position to delegate. Could I have a quick show of hands for those prepared to delegate? That is unanimous, so we will therefore, committee is therefore resolved to delegate application 2103935 Vary, Pettifer's Garages Limited in Shipston. Now we can move to our first substantive item, which is application reference 2103775 OUT, land at the north of Idlicott Road in Holford, and our presenting officer is Alison Willers. Alison, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, the application site is located adjacent to the eastern edge of the village of Halford, off Idlicott Road. The location is shown by the black dot. This planning application requests outline permission for the construction of up to 15 self-build or custom-build dwellings. Only detailed approval for access is sought at this stage. The application site is some distance from the conservation area and any listed buildings, and there are no public rights of way nearby. There is a cul-de-sac of bungalows to the northwest, over here, and some existing dwellings on the southeast corner, over here. There have been a number of new dwellings built fairly recently to the south of the road. So this is Idlicott Road, and there's some large new detached dwellings all along here. The land slopes down towards the River Stour, which is in the location of the pink dashed line, and there is a stream that runs from the north to the south of the site. This is this line here. So here is a recent aerial view of the site showing the application site outlined in red, Halford here, and open countryside to the north and the east. So this slide shows an indicative layout that shows how the plots could be arranged around a central spine road with 3 visitor parking spaces and 5 private drives. There's a new access created from Idlicott Road, and there would be some trimming back of the existing hedgerows to give visibility. The hedgerows would be replanted behind the visibility splays. There are a number of poplars at the front of the site in this area, which are prominent in the street scene. Some have been felled recently due to decay. Others have been shown in the ARB report to have a short life expectancy and are unfortunately not compatible with development close by. Additional trees are to be planted in the landscape buffers, here to the north, 5 metres width here and 10 metres wide here. And there's other tree planting within the site. The stream is to be retained. There is a new play area at the front of the site, which is linked by an existing footpath along Idlicott Road to the village. The suds, the public open space, and the stream and the other incidental open space will be landscaped with details agreed at the reserve matters stage. So the The public open space, including the play area, will be offered to the parish council and/or Stratford District Council to manage with a 20-year commuted sum to cover the management and maintenance. The remainder, including the buffers, will be maintained by the management company. The houses on plots 1 and 2 here are set back behind the open space so as not to conflict visually with far cottages here in the street scene. An additional hedgerow rather than close board fencing will be introduced along the open boundary in the southeast corner here. The perimeter boundary with the close, which is these bungalows here, would be close boarded to protect privacy, but we would be expecting a higher quality boundary treatment where the boundary borders Idlicott Road to the front here, next to number 9, which would enhance the street scene. So in the report, you'll see the usual spread of conditions, but additionally, the permission would include a condition restricting the use of the site to self and custom build housing only. So it wouldn't be open market dwellings. This location adjacent but outside the built up area boundary is justifiable as there is a district-wide under-provision of self and custom build sites, which we are, as an authority, required to address. So we have a number of tailor-made conditions drafted for this type of proposal. The first Reserve Matters application is to be submitted within 2 years and to include all the site infrastructure. So, for example, this would include the layout of the internal access road, footways, any shared surfaces, visitor car parking facilities, manoeuvring areas, any external lighting, hard and soft landscaping details for all the site infrastructure, public open space, landscape buffers, perimeter boundary treatments, and all the incidental open space which isn't incorporated within the residential plot curtilages. There'll be a refuse and recycling strategy, the detailed surface water drainage scheme, and details of the management and maintenance scheme for the site infrastructure and public open space. So the subsequent Reserve Matters applications for the individual plots would be submitted within 3 years and begun within 2 years of the approval of the last Reserve Matters application. This would minimise local disruption by not enabling an extended period of development. So this slide shows the parameters plan. This is this plan, and the plot layout plan, this one, that would be approved at this outline stage. It shows the plot boundaries, the separation distances, the build areas, the frontage lines, garden sizes, which together with the design code would secure the context for further Reserve Matters applications for the individual plots. Detailed consideration for each dwelling would occur at Reserve Matters stage and would be in accordance with our normal development requirements. The detailed stage would include a statement providing an explanation as to how the design of the development responds to the details submitted as part of the outline application, and how the application responds to the principles of the design code, including how it responds to the local character in Halford. The subsequent Reserve Matters applications for each individual plot will also contain detailed evidence of how and when the purchaser has had primary input into the design and layout of the unit. Self and custom build housing can cover a wide spectrum from projects where individuals are involved in the building and managing the construction of their own home from beginning to end, or projects where individuals commission their homes making key design and layout decisions, but the home is built ready for occupation. So this slide, it's a view looking south from the northern edge of the site with Idlicott Road on the horizon. You can just about see the tops of the houses. This photo at the bottom is the ditch that runs north-south through the site down towards the river. These are the neighbouring properties on Idlicott Road, with the site visible through the gap here and on the other side of the wire fence here. These are the houses along the northwestern boundary. So these three are the bungalows on the close, and this house here is the one fronting onto Idlicott Road that's just being extended. So that's the end of the presentation. Mr. Chairman, the updates are as shown on the update sheet. The recommendation is that the application be granted for the reasons detailed in the report, subject to the conditions and notes and completion of a Section 106 agreement, the detailed wording and numbering of which is delegated to officers. Thank you.
Alison, thank you very much indeed. Members, I'm going to assume you've had an opportunity to read the update sheet. Yep, marvellous. Okay, let's call our first speaker for the evening, who is Councillor Nicholas Gale, Chairman of Holford Parish Council. Good evening, Councillor Gale, and welcome. Now, when you're settled and comfortable, you'll have 3 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning before your time is up, and as I said, you'll hear the bell go when your 30 seconds is approaching. The button on the right-hand side will get you going, so it'll turn your microphone on. Otherwise, when you're ready, the floor's yours.
Right. It should be remembered that for very valid planning reasons, a prior application in respect of this site by Carla Holmes was refused. The proposed development of 27 homes has now been superseded by 15 self-built properties. It was the opinion of the planning authority that the original proposed development was considered excessive given the special nature of Halford Village. The fact that what is now proposed, i.e. 15 self-builds, does not change the situation very much. It is too many houses on an unsuitable site. 4 unsuitable new homes are currently being built on the old bowling green off the Fossway, and some 8 homes have been built or have current planning permission to build along the Idlicott Road. This would mean a total of 27 new properties in 3 years. It's literally far too many. The access to the new development is via a lane, not a road. It is narrow and used by a large number of huge tractors from local farms. It's totally unsuitable for a significant number of constructors' vehicles accessing the new site over a potential very long period of build time. The proposal falls outside the built-up area boundary and the curtilage of this small village. This formed part of the reason that the original application was declined, and nothing has changed, really. The village has a garage and a kiosk, but not a shop as such. There is no school, a very limited bus service, and the village simply does not warrant a development of this nature. Halford is currently a compact and very sociable village, and it has been demonstrated that new developments of this nature do not add anything to the village infrastructure whatsoever. Known sewage problems and flood risks have been inherent over the years, and the situation will certainly not be improved by this development. I would ask the panel to seriously consider this application and deny permission to develop the site. Thank you.
Councillor Gale, well within your time. Thank you very much indeed. Members, do we have any questions for Councillor Gale, please? Councillor Mills first.
Thank you. Good evening. Does Halford have a neighbourhood plan?
No, it doesn't. It's a very small village. The parish council is only 3 members, and we simply do not have the resources to do it.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Henry-Seraphim.
Sorry, I was going to ask the same question.
Councillor Curtis.
Thank you. It may be the same, a similar question, but I wondered, has the parish council carried out a housing needs survey for the village?
No.
Anyone else? No. In that case, Councillor Gale, thank you very much for your time and contribution. Okay, let's call our next speaker, who is Liz Nicholson, on behalf of the applicant. Good evening and welcome.
Hello.
You've been here many times before, you know the drill, so 3 minutes, 30-second warning. When you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We recognise that the council and potential developers have had to undertake a lot of learning over the last 2 or 3 years whilst we've been grappling with the principles of self and custom built housing. And we would like to thank your officers, both in your development management and your policy teams, for their hard work in this regard. Roscommon Strategic Land and the Standsgate have worked hard with your officers to design a high quality scheme and an associated design code that meet all the relevant policy requirements and address all the technical points raised by the consultees. In the planning press just this week, there have been a number of articles written about the national position regarding self and custom built housing schemes. From these, it would seem that some authorities are continuing to bury their heads in the sand when it comes to their legal duty to provide service plots. However, it's also apparent that a good number of councils are now embracing these types of schemes and approving proposals for service plots to meet the demand identified in their self and custom build registers. We recognise the situation that this council is currently in. When the legislation for self and custom build housing came into effect, the core strategy was at such an advanced stage, it was not possible to take that legislation into account. So the council has been left without a policy to guide decision making on this type of housing. The council still has a legal duty to provide enough plots to meet demand, and that's a duty it's currently failing to meet. And this leaves it exposed to the risk of applications being approved on appeal, as happened in Stratford-on-Avon in January this year. Even without a core strategy policy, the council can take control of the situation that it finds itself in by approving schemes on suitable sites in appropriate locations as identified in its revised draft site allocations plan. Whilst we're all agreed that this document only has limited weight at this time, it is nevertheless a material consideration, along with the recent appeal decision in Welford and the continuing updated evidence of the substantial shortfall in provision within the district. This scheme in Halford for 15 service plots will make a meaningful contribution to meeting the council's legal responsibilities to provide sufficient service plots for this type of housing need on a site which is allocated in the revised draft site allocations plan. There are no technical grounds on which to refuse the application, and in conclusion, we would ask that the development is supported.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do we have any questions? Please. No? In that case, Ms Nicholson, thank you very much for your time and contribution. Okay, let's call our last speaker on this item, who is Councillor Wally Hoggins, who is substituting for Councillor O'Donnell. Good evening, Councillor. And when you're sat comfortable and ready to go, you will have 5 minutes. Again, I'll give you a 30-second warning before your time is up. When you're ready, the floor is yours.
Good evening. The proposal for 15 self-build properties in Halford, particularly on the Idlicott Road and on this site, is mind-boggling. This is currently open countryside and well outside the built-up area, as been shown on many pictures that you've already seen. An attempt is being inflicted on residents because Stratford District Council has not yet managed to allocate any other land for self-builds. This is grossly unfair. This is a narrow single-track lane that I know well, whose only narrow pavement allows for one person without a dog to use it. Quite simply, the scale of the disruption to residents and the very real dangers it will cause must be a very serious consideration for this committee, as it was previously for the proposed development of the Gala homes. At no point has the landowner approached the parish council to discuss his desire to apply for planning approval. Had they done so, although there might have been discomfort about losing this green finger of land in the village, there would have been an opportunity to discuss the need for any proposed development, if approved, to be carefully managed. Therefore, a reputable builder skilled in site management might have been preferable. This would have also provided the opportunity, with the development of this proposed site, to have had some much needed affordable housing including in the build, and some sill payments, which for a development of this size would have been very beneficial for a small village like Halford. Self-builds, I understand, are devoid of any sill payments. There will be no benefit to the local community or residents in the building of this large number of self-build homes. The disruption of the build will go on for years as different plot purchasers organise their building and finances to build on unique and bespoke timescales. With a self-build development of this scale, there will be multiple large-scale deliveries on a daily basis for years. The road is quite unsuitable for such a prolonged and complicated scheme that you have before you. Halford is a lovely village. The residents are not NIMBYs. They simply want the best sort of housing available for the needs of the whole village, and housing that is sustainable in the long term for generations to come. The village does not need another 15 enormous executive-style homes. As Councillor Nick Gale pointed out, all of the houses that have been built recently, I think it was 20-something, have all been of gargantuan proportions with gargantuan price tags. So there are 15 people who wish... So the village does not need another 15 enormous executive-style homes, either self-built or otherwise. The developer and landowner has not provided any proof that there are 15 people who wish to build a self-built property in Halford at the price it will cost. This application is therefore audacious. What the village need is engagement from the landowner about preferences from the residents, some of whom would like to see affordable homes and starter homes so that we can be a multi-generational village which is able to welcome those from all financial backgrounds. To summarise, these type of houses, the self-build nature of the houses on the location combine to make this application wholly unsuitable. This is not a suitable scheme and it is not a suitable location. Thank you.
Councillor Ward-Hoggins, thank you very much indeed. Members, do we have any questions for our substitute ward member? Nope. In that case, Councillor Ward-Hoggins, thank you very much for your time and contribution this evening. Okay, we will move now to points of clarification with our officers. Does anyone have any points they want to clarify? Councillor Jennings first, please.
The Welford appeal was mentioned. How relevant is that here?
Obviously, each decision, each site is considered on its own merits. So in the officers making their recommendation, they've had regard to the policies and the material planning considerations relevant to this site. In honesty, I wouldn't be able to give you a definitive answer as to what the reasons were for the decision on the Welford to actually have been refused and why the inspector considered that it was appropriate to allow the appeal. So I wouldn't want to say that it is relevant in this circumstance, because obviously the circumstances that led to that refusal may be different to the specific circumstances on this site.
It's clear as mud is the expression, I believe.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I refer to page 31 of the officer's report, or 31 of the papers, and the paragraph which says natural environment? Revealing my ignorance, I'm concerned that there's a need for a bioset offset scheme, and I don't know whether it would be something that would be considered at outline stage or reserve matter stage, but my point of concern is I would like to see, if this application were to be approved, that any environmental offset scheme was delivered before development started, not afterwards. Is that possible?
So the offsetting scheme can take a number of forms. So the biodiversity impact assessment has shown that there's a need for to provide a scheme to the value of 3.48 biodiversity units. So the Section 106 will include provisions where the developer can either make a financial contribution for the equivalent monetary value, or they can buy like offsetting at a site that provides, like for example, a site which plants trees, so they can purchase it that way, or they're free to purchase, so they can do either or a combination. So it's a requirement of the Section 106 that will be submitted to the District Council.
I'm still left with the feeling that may provide an agreement about what is to happen. And if it's money, well, that's fine. I understand that.
It's either money or something off-site. So it's not physical works on the site.
No, I understand that. If it is to be off-site, my point is that should be delivered before development takes place, because I have experience where off-site provision is required to be made as part of a 106, and it doesn't happen, and it ends up 5 years later down the track being a matter of enforcement. I would prefer to see a developer provide the off-site offset before work starts, because there's no argument about it at that stage.
Okay. I think I can't remember.
I'm going to follow up that question myself with, am I right in thinking the offset scheme, where I think you can buy credits or tokens or something, is a national scheme, so it's almost national policy that we sort of work with, and the delivery of the biodiversity is a county council run scheme, yes, rather than a district council run scheme. I appreciate that's one option, but that's the county council scheme, is that right?
Yes.
Microphone back on, please.
So the developer can have a choice when the Section 106 is drafted. They will have the choice of meeting their requirement in any one of those three ways.
Understood. Thank you. Councillor Mills, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. It's top of page 14. It says proposed site falls in open countryside outside the defined built-up area boundary, and then it goes on to say, therefore consider the application does not comply with policies CS 1516 and AS 10. Can you explain to me a little bit more about that, please?
So the built-up area boundary is, does it start there? So it runs down this boundary here. So if you can see on that one, I don't know why it's not. So the built-up area boundary is up and down this boundary here. So this site here is technically outside the built-up area boundary.
So it doesn't comply with, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Adam, please.
Thank you. I've got two questions, so I'll just go through the first one, which hopefully be quite simple. On the update sheet, you note that the protected species and refuge strategy conditions have been amalgamated. Could you just clarify how those are still covered by the remaining conditions, please?
So in the original, when I originally drafted the report with the original summary of the conditions, I had a separate protected species condition and a separate environmental management plan condition. So it was felt when we were reviewing the drafted conditions that they could be amalgamated, still achieve the same thing. It's just I suppose it's just less words, I suppose. And in terms of the bin, the waste and recycling strategy, I think as I originally drafted, I'd required a waste strategy and a separate bin compliance condition. So those have been amalgamated just because they're the same topic.
So the second question, which was a different matter, was relationship to the highway network and the comments from County Highways. I suppose in two parts, is the the response we've had from the Highways Authority in relation to just the highways on site and the say the visibility displays to it, or does it consider access from say the Fosse Way up to the site? Because obviously concerns been raised about the adequacy of that road in particular.
They would look at the impact of the proposal on the highway network and look at it from a highway safety point of view on the network, not and, as well as the immediate access points on the site.
So I suppose that the only follow-up to that then, looking at the, because obviously one aspect that was noted in this was the SAP, which obviously draws upon the Schlar document, which I notice has essentially flags that the relationship to the highway network being an issue. Would you see that assessment that we have made in the Schlar document is at odds with the highways assessment, or does it supersede it? How do those two sort of decisions relate to each other?
I don't think, with all due respect to my colleagues in policy, I think when they put together the SAP document and the criteria that they don't examine it in the same degree that we've rigorously examined it through the course of a planning application.
Councillor Curtis, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just a few points, if I could. First of all, Councillor Wally Hoggins said that no sill payments were payable on this, and there would be no requirement for affordable housing. Can you just confirm those 2 points?
So, if you prospective purchasers of self and custom build plots, they can apply to be exempt from sill. So the initial purchaser, as long as they submit a Part 1 sill exemption form prior to commencement development, and then a sill exemption form prior to occupation, they're exempt. The condition of the exemption is that they have to live in the house for 3 years.
Yeah. So there could be still exemption on all of these, and there is no requirement for any affordable housing. That's correct, isn't it?
No, not on self and custom build.
Just a couple of other points, if I may, Chair. You mentioned that part of the criteria for custom self-build is primary input into design, key design and layout decisions. But is there any definition of what primary input into design actually is?
No, I don't think there is a definition of what primary input is. Right. It is required in the legislation that we consider it. And I think we'll take each case on its merits. And with each reserve matters application for each plot, we will be asking for a statement from the applicant for them to demonstrate that they have, how they've interpreted that, and we will consider it.
But if there is no definition, it's quite hard to see how that can be agreed, if you like. Sorry, Chair, I've just got 2 other quick points. One, what I'd be interested to know what a biodiversity unit is and how it's measured. And also on page 27, talk about the public open space, including the play area. That will be managed with a 20-year commuted sum. Can you tell us how the commuted sum would be calculated? Thank you.
So in Warwickshire, we're quite lucky. There was a pilot project, I think probably about 7 years ago, where there were a number of councils across the country took part in a pilot scheme to devise a metric tool. We are very lucky that we've got one of the country's experts, and the tool that we developed here in Warwickshire has stood the test of time, where lots of them have failed nationally. So the Warwickshire Biodiversity Impact Assessment tool, which is what we most commonly have been using, and it compares the existing habitat types and their distinctiveness and their quality with what's proposed. So it's like a tool for assessing the before and after scenarios, but it uses the kind of national classification of habitat types to compare before and after. It looks at what's being lost and what's being gained, and looks at how, considers how like each type of habitat has got a distinctiveness score, and it also considers how likely that is to be attained, and there's all sorts of corrections within the kind of formulas for it. That metric is being replaced by a national metric, which is referred to as DEFRA metric, which is going to be compulsory from November this year onwards. And so our Warwickshire one is going to be phased out, I think. So that the score, the net loss, so the Warwickshire metric, it gives you a score at the end, which is equivalent to a number of units either gained or lost. So we always obviously try and secure a net gain at the moment. So on this site, there's a net loss of 3.48, which is equivalent to, I think it was about £119,000 equivalent, roughly, not more than. And that's a calculation that the ecologists will input all the information into the spreadsheet, and the county council will interpret it and provide that figure.
And my other point was that how the commuted sum would be calculated.
So at the first reserve matters application stage, we would agree the detailed specification for the public open space, and we will also agree a management and maintenance scheme. So once we've got those two documents, we will then be able to go out and get quotes for like a year's worth of management and maintenance of that particular open space. And I think the intention would be to get 3 quotes, and then find the average, and then multiply that by 20 years. Simply. But yes, yeah, it's all index linked.
Councillor Mills, please.
Mr. Chairman. Alison, it was refused, was it 7 years ago, for 28 dwellings? I know this is 15. Is that the difference why this is being granted, because it's a smaller development, or was it other issues?
I've actually got, I can show you the scheme actually, I do have it, I think. I have a picture of it. Oh, that was it. So that's the Carla scheme that was refused. So it's the same plot, but it's 28 houses, and it was for erection of 28 dwellings and associated infrastructure works, including sustainable drainage works and equipped play area with access off Idlicott Road. So a similar spine road, but obviously a lot less, a lot more houses. The site that I've obviously that was in front of us today is 15 dwellings. This was 28. So we're only considering this site today because it's self and custom build, and there's a district-wide deficit of self and custom build plots. That's the difference, really. This was just normal open market housing.
Okay, any other points that need clarifying? No? Before we move to debate, I did see Ms Nicholson's hand go up. I do have the option to call you forward for a point of fact, a disputed point of fact. Is that what you were wanting to come forward for? Do you want to make your way forward to the seat in front, please?
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't normally want to do this, but the first question that was asked was about the Welford appeal, and your officers said it was refused. It wasn't refused. Your committee supported that scheme in principle. We ran into difficulties trying to agree the Section 106, the details of how you secure self and customer build. In the end, we felt we had no choice but to go to non-determination appeal. So that was what happened with the Welford scheme. It was 10 dwellings. And I think what you're being asked to do, because there was another question about the boundary and the policies, CS 15, 16 and 10, AS 10. We all accept this is outside the built-up area boundary. It's therefore in conflict with those policies. The policies have been determined to have moderate weight because they don't directly refer to self-build. You have nothing specifically about self-build, so they've got a little bit less weight because of that. They've got moderate weight rather than full weight. However, your shortfall on self-build is a material consideration. In the Welford appeal, the inspector said that is a material consideration that outweighs the policies that have moderate weight. So hopefully I've stuck to the facts and not tried
Thank
to
you.
do anything
You've pushed the
more.
boundaries, I think, but I'm happy. Okay, thank you very much for that. Members, let's move into debate. Who would like to kick us off? Don't all jump. Councillor Jennings.
Okay, and obviously this is all about a gap in policy, and we keep on coming up with this every time we have self-builds. Obviously, when the original policies were drawn up, self-builds, I guess, weren't a thing. So that, but obviously since then, government legislation has changed, and we're sort of filling the gap with the SAP at the moment. We do have a legal obligation to provide these self-builds, and we're short on numbers at the moment. We've got 76 we have to allow. I'm not going to propose anything at this stage, but I guess I'm leaning towards the officer's recommendations, and I don't see a material planning reason to go against them at this stage. But
Are you proposing or are you waiting?
I'm not proposing. I'm waiting for everyone else to have theirs.
Okay, Councillor Mills next, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. As you can probably guess by my tone, a little bit sort of uncomfortable with this one, Mr. Chairman. It is outside the built-up area boundary, and we have the same thing in our village. We don't want this, you know, and as you said before, you know, policies are policies, and okay, Liz was saying it holds medium weight because of its self-build, but they are still there. I'm just uncomfortable about it at the moment, Mr. Chairman, so I'll wait to see what everybody else has to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Kendall, please.
Yeah. I think I'm in exactly the same position as Councillor Jennings, Councillor Mills. I am struggling to see a reason to go against, but I am very, very uncomfortable with the fact this is outside of the built-up area boundary. And that's all I'm going to say for a second. I'll come back later if that's okay.
Okay, Councillor Curtis, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just looking at page 14 of the report, the Self-Build and Custom House Building Act 2015. I think it's just worth looking at the wording. The purpose of this act is to help diversify the housing market, increase consumer choice, and tackle the housing crisis. Now, we've heard from the parish council that this isn't the type of housing that's required there. It's not, so it doesn't seem that this self-build is helping diversify the housing market, nor increasing consumer choice, and it's not essentially tackling the housing problem that we have in the district. And regarding the comments by Liz and others about the weight of policies, I think in the end it is up to this committee just to as we all know, to decide what weight we give to various policies when coming to our decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Henry-Seraphin next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm extremely uncomfortable with this. There seems to be a lack of consultation with Halford Parish Council. These sort of developments actually destroy a village, because if there's any young people in the village want to retain a new house built in the village, they couldn't afford this type of house anyway. And I'm always sceptical of self-build, custom build, because I've been in the building trade all my life. A self-build is you build it yourself and you live there for a long time. It's nothing about making a big profit. But I feel that these houses are too big and will actually spoil the village. And I am very uncomfortable with it. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I share the unease. This is building in the open countryside, and normally, if it wasn't self-build, it's unlikely that we would approve. But this is a matter of legislation being imposed, as well as a decision from the inspectorate, which bears relevance. The agent, when she made her presentation, made the statement that the application complies with policy. And I haven't heard from the case officer any information to counter that. And while I hear words that were said about the lack of affordable housing, while I hear about the state of the road, the lane, and whether it can cope with the volume of traffic and so on, nevertheless, we have statutory authorities who've said the road's okay. There is no requirement within the legislation that affordable housing forms part of such development. I could mention, in support of other councillors who have shared their doubts, that in the neighbouring village of Newbold there are houses of over £1 million unsold. So I wonder whether there is demand, but that's for the market to decide. I share the reluctance, basically because it's building in the open countryside, but I am driven to the conclusion that the officer has gone through all the requirements and has backed up what the agent has said, that this application is policy compliant, and with a degree of reluctance, I would find myself on the side of supporting the officer.
Is that a proposal to grant in line with the officer's recommendation? I will, based upon that's my objective reading of the circumstances, and I do it with reluctance. Understood. Thank you very much. Councillor Adam, next, please.
Thank you very much. I actually agree completely with what Councillor Harvey's just said. I think that the main bone of contention is clearly the open countryside, and that is outside the built-up area boundary. I think it's worth noting that the officer's report does specifically say that CS 15, 16 and AS 10 are the most important policies for determining the application, but it then does justify why the weight is adjusted to suit our obligation within a national framework. We've been through these before, and there's a lot of things that I am uncomfortable about. I do like the idea of self-builds being self-builds, but obviously there are limitations, open opportunities within the obligations and the Act of Parliament to see that we do have developments as we're seeing here within that framework. We do have a deficit. I've previously raised concerns about how that deficit is calculated, but I think there is one. The issues that I might otherwise have concerns about, I think, aren't substantively backed up by evidence, such as the housing need for the village itself, being that there isn't a housing needs survey. And again, affordable housing, yes, I think we absolutely do need to see affordable housing, but again, this wouldn't be liable for that anyway. There is reluctance on the fact that it's open countryside, but I can't see myself finding significant reason to go against it, and the officer's clearly been very diligent in going through all of these and making sure that there are adequate conditions to see controls by the council. So I'm quite happy to second Councillor Harvey on that basis, noting reluctance as he did.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much indeed. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Councillor Foreman, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm like the rest of my colleagues. I'm uncomfortable with this. The parish council have objected. There are 32 letters of objection from residents. The ward members objected. And I'm comfortable with the no affordable housing, but it's finding a reason to go against the officer. So I'm struggling with it at the moment.
Okay, I think everyone has had something to say, so unless anyone else has anything more pressing to say now, we will move to a vote. The proposal is to grant, in line with the officer's recommendation, made by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Adam. Could I have a show of hands for those in favour, please? 5. And those against? 3. And abstentions? 1. Committee therefore resolves to grant application 2103775 out. This is land to the north of Idlicott Road in Holford. Okay, let's move to our next item, which is application reference 2203627 FUL. That is land off Shipston Road in Ellesmere. Our presenting officer momentarily will be Malvina Idziak. Malvina, as soon as you're set up and ready to go, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chairman. This application is located near Aysmore and in the open countryside. As you can see on this location plan, the site is etched in red here and located off Shipston Road. The site area is approximately 1.21 hectares. And here on this slide you can see the application site within the wider area. So what is being proposed? Planning permission is sought to erect 2 barns for the agricultural purposes. As you can see here, one would be located close to the highway and one would be located at the bottom of the field there, with the arrows indicating the front elevation of the barn. You can also see on this drawing the existing track that was previously approved under an AGNOT application. And this slide shows the proposed plan, floor plan and elevations of the buildings. They would have the same design. As you can see, the barn would have the width of 18 meters and the depth of 9 meters, with the maximum height about 5.6 meters. And on this photo you can see the site looking towards the field, the bottom of the site. You can also see part of the existing truck. The site ends where the fence is located to the side. So this photograph shows the existing truck as well as the nearby fields in the background, including the existing hay bales stored on site. And this slide shows the truck again, including the existing barn on the field next door, which is in a different ownership. So this slide shows the top of the site. Behind the hedge runs Shipston Road, and this is where the first barn would be located there. And the last slide shows the site access. Chairman, the recommendation is to approve the application for planning permission subject to the conditions as detailed within the committee report. Thank you.
Marlena, thank you very much indeed. Let's call our next speaker, who is Councillor Martin Cole of Brailes Parish Council. Good evening, Councillor Cole, and welcome. And the same way as our other speakers, once you're settled and seated, if you press the button on the right, the microphone will go live. You'll have 3 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning. The floor is yours.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Martin Cole. I am from a farming family local to Brailes. I have been farming in Brailes for the previous 49 years with my family. I know this site very well because I used to farm the adjacent Drybank farm to it. So I know the capabilities of this land, what it cannot do with the whole area. I speak on behalf of Brailes Parish Council. We raise the objection and comments to this application as follows. The plan is for 2 buildings, 167 square metres each. One sited, one bottom of field, one 200 metres to the top of the site. All this with one plan for the building. In all my 30 years on Brailes Parish Council, I cannot recall an application asking for 2 buildings at once. This is most unacceptable, especially as they are so far apart. As stated, a previous application in July last year was for an AGNOT for the hard standing. This will come to light later on what an AGNOT is. The feasibility report falls short on the acreage, 1.213 hectares, or as I understand, 3 acres. If you take this hard standing area out of this acreage, you are quite drastically reduced in the size of land available for the farming area. I understand they hope to purchase land next to this, but this is a possibility, but not a fact, and you only deal with facts here tonight, Mr. Chairman. Justification statement 2.3, under scale and siting, agricultural buildings have been located in closer proximity to existing access. No, this just looks, but just look at the plans, you will see for yourself, but this is stated in the statement. Under number 3 of the statement, the conclusion states agricultural storage buildings will be located within ownership curtilage. Same statement, different wording, equals confusion. In the plans and correspondence, there is a correspondence from the CPRE, which I believe is your own head of housing and planning. The quote, they have concerns on this application, and the comment is making a mockery of AS10 core strategy. In Public Reports Pack 19042023, Planning Committee's quote, the case officer raised a concern that insufficient information had been provided to justify the proposed development given the modest size of the application site. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Spot on time-wise. Thank you very much, Councillor Cole. Members, do we have any questions for our councillor, please? No? In that case, Councillor Cole, thank you very much for your time and contribution this evening. Okay, let's call our next speaker, who is Natasha Silver, on behalf of the applicant. Good evening, Ms. Silver. Welcome. I think you know the drill. You'll have 3 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning. When you're ready, the floor's yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I am here to speak in support of this application for 2 agricultural buildings at Withycombe Fields Farm, Aylesmore. I thank officers for their constructive feedback and assistance to date and fully endorse their positive recommendation. The proposed buildings will be steel portal framed agricultural buildings with green wall cladding and a grey profile sheet roof. These materials are typical of modern agricultural buildings and therefore preserve the distinctive rural character of the site and surrounding area. The proposed buildings will be located to the front and rear of the site. One will be used for the storage of agricultural machinery and equipment necessary for the operation and maintenance of the land, and the other for the storage of hay and feed for the livestock. Last year, the hay had been ruined after having to be stored outside, which caused it to rot and mould. Therefore, it was unusable, and a building is needed for dry storage. The applicants are currently in the process of expanding their family-run business at Withycombe Fields Farm, which includes sheep, lamb, poultry, eggs, and hay sales, which all need safe, dry storage for feed and equipment. They are expanding their flock, and this year's spring flock has just been born. They are also planning to have 3 cuts of grass yield this year. 2 smaller buildings were proposed instead of 1 larger one due to the applicant's concern that the storing of dry hay and feed together with the machinery may not be safe from a fire safety perspective, and they wish to separate the 2 to minimise the risk of extensive fire damage. The existing farm business is growing, and these buildings are needed to facilitate its continued expansion. Policies CS22 and AS10 support opportunities for business development and the countryside, including farm-based activities, and therefore support the principle of the proposed agricultural businesses to grow the business. The Parish Council objected in part to the scheme as they are concerned that the buildings may in the future be converted to housing. This was the objection that was put online. However, it is worth noting that at present, both Class Q and full planning policy require buildings to be in place for at least 10 years before conversion is even considered as a possibility. Furthermore, the application must be considered as is on the facts as they stand, and therefore theoretical future applications are irrelevant and would need to be assessed on their own merits against the relevant planning policy and legislation of that type. In summary, the officer's report provides a detailed justification for the granting of the application. Whilst they did raise some initial concerns, additional justification was provided, which has been listed in the report, and then they therefore gave their positive recommendation. Were the agricultural buildings approved, the officer has suggested a number of conditions be attached to the decision, including a condition restricting use to solely agricultural, which we would happily accept. We hope that this is a straightforward decision to approve the scheme in line with the officer's recommendation and trust that members will agree. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Spot on time again. Thank you very much. Councillor Kendall, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. Why are the buildings spaced so far apart? I understand you say that there's concern about fire, but that's quite an extreme distance, isn't it?
I understand that. I think the applicant's thoughts when they brought it to us was that they wanted to, rather than breaking up the space by having the buildings closer together, but far enough apart so that they were still accessible, was that by having them at either side, you had a bigger space in between that could be used for hay and grass, rather than putting one in the middle and therefore breaking up the continuation of the line.
I'm not sure I quite follow that it has to be at the extreme ends of the field, though. You could easily, and I know I'm straying into hypotheticals, but it didn't need to be in the middle of the field. I'm just struggling as to why.
It didn't have to be either end. That was the applicant's request when we drew up the plans. That was how they asked for it to be set out.
Thank you.
Councillor Adam, please.
Thank you. Could you just confirm, is the land encompassed by the application site make up the whole of the farm as is, or is there additional land outside of what's noted here which makes up practical farming land?
This is the land as it currently stands. They are currently in the process of negotiating to purchase land to the east of the land, but that is currently it as it stands. This is basically the start of the business, and they need the buildings to work on what they have, but also with capacity for going forward as they purchase more land.
Councillor Curtis, please.
Thank you. Councillor Adam has sort of asked part of my question. So the sheep and the chickens and so forth that you referred to earlier on have all been raised on this plot of land?
Yes, are currently on the land and more are being purchased.
Thank you. I won't go into any more hypotheticals, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Jennings, please.
It's a bit along the same lines. So how many acres do they actually own? Yep.
It's about 3.
3 acres, isn't it? And sorry, as a final confirmation, and each of these are 167 square metres, 2 of them?
162.
162, sorry.
No.
So that's about 24 square
metres in total, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mills, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Is this a completely new business? Because I don't know what happened to the hay that was reaped in the past, and they didn't have any covering. So
this is a relatively new business. They bought the land 2 years ago to start a family-run farming business. They got the AgNot for the access and the hard standing first, and then applied for the buildings as part of a continued expansion and development of the farm. So it is in its infancy, but it is getting bigger.
Any other questions, members? Councillor Henry-Seraphin?
Thank you. Do they need such size buildings for the small acreage of the land?
So one building is for machinery, one building is for hay and feed. They have included capacity for growth in the buildings. They are, as they get more land, as they get more animals, expecting to need more feed and more space for hay storage. So getting a building that just facilitates what's there now would not help them a year down the line when they need a bit more space. You have to factor in growth when you're designing the size.
I'll just ask you one more thing. Between the buildings, is hard standing going from one building to the other? The buildings are so far apart, is the hard standing going from one building to another building?
Well, not quite. It goes part way up the site. This was originally proposed just for access further into the site, with the building at the top being used for machinery that will go up and down the field anyway. Therefore, it didn't need a specific access point.
Councillor Jennings.
So it's one more question. The elevations, is the barn at the bottom, is it on a flat land or is it on a slope?
Ms Silver, could you put your microphone on, please?
Yes, they're relatively flat, the land. There isn't much of an incline at all as you go from front to back.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, members? No? In that case, Ms Silver, thank you very much for your time and contribution. Right, so let's call for our last speaker on this item, who is Councillor Whalley-Hoggins again. Welcome back. Oh, absolutely not. You know the drill. 5 minutes, 30-second warning. When you're sat, comfortable, ready to go, the floor's yours.
Applications such as these are very numerous, and so are applications to convert former agricultural buildings into houses. Under the COUQ system, applications like that must be granted. Applicants are then apt to change these permissions to apply for their barns not to be converted, but to be exchanged for conventional homes, which make a total mockery of policy AS10 in the core strategy, and will and do make a total mockery of planning committees such as this. It is therefore essential that permissions for agricultural buildings should not be granted unless you can be absolutely sure that they are essential to the applicant's needs and no larger than strictly necessary. This land totals 2.5 acres, not 3 acres, due to the permission previously granted for hard standing, which has already been developed. This land will therefore only support a maximum of 10 sheep, as 1 acre can raise 3 or 4 sheep. The field is unsuitable for haylage of any sort or for raising livestock for more than 5 months of the year. It is simply too wet. There will be no straw to store from this land, and 10 sheep do not eat 2 barns worth of food a year or need an entire barn of equipment to service them. The applicant owns just 3 acres. They are not farmers. They have not provided any business plan for their supposed farm. We've heard today of a farm being mentioned, a name given to it. No one in Brales has ever heard of it. The applicant's name is Wigram. Nobody's heard of Wigram the farmers, but they've heard of Wigram Groundscapes and Landscape of Tyso, but they're involved in construction engineering and civil engineering. We just don't know who these people are. No farmer needs 2 barns of this gargantuan proportions for 3 acres of land. Other businesses, however, might make excellent use of 2 considerable sized barns, which will each measure 167 metres squared, especially if they are linked with hard standing, as per the previous successful application and pictures. This is an audacious application, and in the justification statement, the agent states that these 2 barns are needed to serve the existing agricultural business. There is no existing agricultural business, and to provide sufficient provision for it to expand over the coming years. There is no land either for sale or likely to become available. I say, come back when you need it. Come back when you've proven that you are actually farmers who want to farm the land. The need for these barns is like buying a twin pram before a baby has even been conceived. I am also astounded that the agricultural statement says it's not in the green belt. It is, however, in open countryside. The whole of Brales and Long Compton is a picturesque rural area. These barns will also be able to be seen from the Cotswold Protected Landscape Area, and that is not a matter that can be dismissed, as the views and vistas from the CPL are of equal importance. These barns are positioned in close proximity to the CPL. It is shameful that this application has been brought before you. Clearly, there is only one farming expert in this room associated with this application, and that's the parish councillor, Councillor Martin Cole, who at the age he is has been farming in Brales for 49 years. In addition, Mr Cole has asked me to tell you that this application doesn't have a waste disposal form attached to it, which is a requirement for all farmers with any development. I am weary of the lack of understanding of the fundamental requirements and detailed requirements of a business plan I've continually forgotten about. And yes, farmers do need to provide these too. This application is taking us for fools. There is no justification for these buildings on this site. It is not a farm. 9 sheep do not make it a viable business. So I say, nice try, Sheldon Bosley and Mr Wigram, but we've got the measure of your real intentions, and it certainly isn't farming. Thank you.
Councillor Evans, thank you very much indeed. Do we have any questions, members? Councillor Curtis?
Just one. Thank you very much, Councillor. That was very informative. You mentioned something about waste disposal that you said should be part of any agriculture. Could you just give us a little more detail on that? It was I lost it in translation, I'm afraid.
To be fair, if you need those details, you'll need to call the farmer in the room to the table, because he will have more in-depth knowledge of that. Sorry. It is a requirement for all farmers to have a waste disposal statement and permission for that disposal, because farming has a lot of plastic waste associated with it, so they all have to be registered for that, is my understanding, and that should have been part of this application. You can't be a farmer red tractor approved, etc. in order if you don't have that. It is missing from this and should have really formed part of the business plan as well, because getting rid of waste is part of a cost of running a farm. As I said,
I think what we'll do.
The parish councillor, who is a farmer, knows more about that. He just didn't have time in his speech to talk to you about.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I think what we'll do is get our planners to give you a definitive from a planning perspective and planning law. That ultimately is what we're looking at. Do we have any other questions, members? No? Councillor Williams, thank you very much for your time and contribution to you. Okay, we will open up for questions of our officers. I think we might have a question for you.
I'm not aware that a waste disposal plan is required on an application of this nature. It may well be that there are separate waste management regulations outside of the planning remit, which I anticipate is actually what is required in that respect.
Councillor Jennings.
2 questions for you. Was a business plan provided, stroke, is one needed? And the next question was, have they submitted evidence for the need for barns of that size for the amount of land they have? Sorry, and do they need to provide that?
In terms of the business plan, normally it is not required to submit with a planning application, although I'm aware that in case of agnots, the assessment of an agnot application includes justification of the need, and the need must be current, not projected, whereas in a case of a planning application, applicants can submit applications for development, including taking into account their projected needs, if that makes sense. So in this case, I guess that's why there is no requirement to submit a business plan or anything like that.
Just to add to that, within policy AS10, if you have it in front of you, part E of AS10 in respect of a dwelling, and it says a dwelling that forms part of the conversion of a building in the open countryside where it's ancillary to a business and is necessary to ensure the efficient and secure operation of the business. If you then move down to the development management considerations, which is part 6, that's where it refers to the need for a business plan to be submitted. It's not in relation to part O, which is what this application has been considered under.
Councillor Adam, next, please.
Thank you. I think it possibly might be covered by your previous answer, but I was going to ask the, I suppose, key differences between agnot and full, and why this is not a agnot and is a full application. You might want to elaborate.
In this case, as you can see, the application site is quite small, and it is because a larger holding was divided, I assume, and parcels of land sold off to different owners, and at this point these small parcels of land became like separate holdings. But because on the wider holding there was agnot granted and erected, as you could see on the photos, to the side there was this small barn to the west. Because of that, because on the wider holding a barn was erected under the agnot application, the applicants could not exercise the same route to apply for a barn.
Councillor Mills, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Malwina, you've got one barn one end, one barn the other end. All that stripping in between the barns, that's all agricultural land, is it?
Yes.
Everything. So, could not the barns be built side by side? What was the reason for them not? Which would make more sense to me.
So I think the applicant, or actually that was the agent who explained that the reason to separate the two was to keep the hay and feed separately from the machinery. and the reason behind that is fire safety, because I guess it makes sense that the two barns are separated and there is a considerable distance, because in a case of fire of the hay barn, for example, the barn with the machinery would be less likely to be destroyed, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Yes.
Just on that point, obviously, officers would only ask for amendments to an application where we consider that there is a harm or an issue that resolves resolution, and we feel that those amendments would overcome that. If I draw your attention to page 55 of the report, where we've considered the landscape and character impacts, that outlines why we consider that arrangement acceptable. So we wouldn't necessarily have had to have got into a situation of asking for justification for the separation distances of those two buildings.
Councillor Curtis, please.
Thanks, Chair. I believe earlier on, Malwina, you indicated that, or it had been indicated by somebody, sorry, that before any change of use could be considered, this would have to be used as an these would have to be used as agricultural buildings for 10 years. Are there any exceptions to that, or were we minded to grant this application, would it be absolutely guaranteed that there could be no change of use for 10 years?
I appreciate why you are asking that question, but obviously from our perspective, and from your perspective, you are making an assessment of the application as submitted, and it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to think about what would happen later on, because obviously if a prior approval application was to be submitted, or a full planning application for the conversion would be submitted, we would have to consider that application at that time. It wouldn't be appropriate for us to be making an assessment of that situation at this point.
And of course, the national policies could change in 10 years, so it's worth bearing that in mind. Councillor Harvey, been patient.
Two questions. Could the officers confirm that the who makes an application is not a planning matter, i.e. whether somebody is a farmer or a landscaper or whatever they do, and whoever they are is irrelevant from a planning point of view? That's question number one. And question number two, the window through which this application is supported in relation to AS10 is AS10A, which quoted in the report says, a building or structure related to agriculture, horticulture and forestry where it is required for such purposes. Was any thought given to, or is there any case for an agricultural consultant's view being sought, given the doubt that's been raised between the scale of the proposal and the 3-acre barn, the 3-acre field? I would feel more comfortable if there was a farming expert who had said whatever he wants to say that we could then take into account.
So in respect of your first question, could you just repeat that for me so I make sure they answer it correctly?
Who makes an application is not a planning matter?
No, not generally, and generally government guidance discourages sort of personal permissions where you would in effect condition it to that person. So no, you wouldn't necessarily take into account who is applying for the application. And in respect to your second question with regarding to getting an independent assessment, we don't generally on applications like this, but certainly policy AS10 in the development management considerations does refer to an independent assessment of the case will be undertaken on behalf of the council where necessary. So obviously, as the decision makers, that is for you to determine that policy as you wish.
Thank you very much. Okay, are we all done with points of clarification? Councillor Jennings isn't.
So, from what you've just said, could we put it on as a condition that a assessment was done by an agricultural expert? Or we grant it subject to?
I don't consider that that would meet the tests, because ultimately, if you were putting a condition on of that nature, if the consultant came back and they felt that they hadn't demonstrated, or the business case or the scale of the development was not in alignment with the operations on that site, then ultimately we've already approved the development, so you wouldn't necessarily be able to rescind it. So if you feel that an assessment of that nature is required to enable you to make the decision, it should be undertaken before the decision is made in that circumstance.
Thank you. Has everyone else finished with points of clarification? We can move into debate. Who would like to kick us off? Councillor Curtis.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I'll kick us off. At the very least, I would like to see this application or any decision deferred until we have further evidence. Looking at page 54 of the report, I think it might be enlightening for the committee to see what the statement from the applicants was, the other evidence that's there, and then looking at page 197 in the core strategy, it does say, where planning permission is required, applicants will have to demonstrate functional need for the proposed building. An independent assessment of the case will be undertaken on behalf of the council where necessary. So I think, at the very least, until we've got further information, I'd like to either refuse or at least defer any decision. Thank you, Chair.
Is that a proposal to defer so that a report can be undertaken?
Yes, I'll be quite happy to do that.
I will happily second that. Simply on the basis that the scale of that field for the scale of the two barns, the separations of, etc., 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 makes me feel a little uncomfortable. So I want to have a definitive response from an expert in the matters to say that, do you know what, this is justifiable given the circumstances. So I'm perfectly happy to second that. Does anyone else want to speak?
Yeah.
Councillor Serafin?
Yes, thank you, Chair. To me, this doesn't add up. There is no way you're going to fill one of these barns with the hay off 3 acres of ground. I would classify this as a small holding, not agricultural. And I don't think it is quite right. There's something, in my mind, fishy about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's the purpose of getting the report. So unless anyone else desperately wants to speak, I think we can move. We've got a proposal. It's been seconded. Let's move to a vote. The proposal is to defer a decision so that we can get a full independent assessment done for the reasons that we've obviously set out. Could I have Councillor Curtis?
Chair, yes, could I just say that we, as well as the independent assessment, we also see this further information, the statement from the applicants justifying the need. So we have sight of that additional information.
Yep. That should be on the planning application, so it's available, so you'll be able to log on and get that. I think the deferral for the report is well justified and appropriate. Okay, so let's have a show of hands, please, for those in favour of deferral for the reasons given. That is unanimous. So committee therefore resolves to defer application 2203-627 FUL, land off Shipston Road in Ellesmere. Right, we will move to our next item, which is application 2300-121 FUL, Primrose House in Snitterfield. Now, our presenting officer is in fact going to be Alison Willers tonight, and I'm going to make myself vacant and hand over to the very capable Councillor Kendall.
Right. Good evening, everyone. Right, so we then move to item 7, application reference 23/00121/FUL, Primrose House, 9 The Hill, Kings Lane, Snitterfield. This is then for the erection of a carport, including store. Presenting officer? I'll just slow down a bit. Go on, give me a sec. All ready? Presenting officer, Alison Willers, over to you.
Thank you. So the application site, Primrose House, is located southwest from the main built-up parish of Snitterfield to the south of the A46, approximate location shown by the black dot. So the site is located off Kings Lane and is located within the green belt, and it's in the special landscape area. The application proposes the erection of a carport and store. This application is a resubmission of an earlier application, 22/0007/full, that was refused and very recently dismissed at appeal. This is an aerial view of the site showing the approximate application boundary in red. The location is semi-rural with open countryside on all sides apart from immediate neighbours on Kings Lane. So the existing site is comprised of a large house with gardens to the front and the rear. If you can see my cursor, this is the house, gravel drive, gardens to the front, lawn. The house previously benefited from a garage on the site located immediately north of the dwelling, which is this rectangle here, if you can see my cursor. The garage has since been changed into ancillary accommodation through the approval of a retrospective planning permission, and an additional planning permission has been granted for a building to link the ancillary building to the main house. This permission has yet to be implemented, I understand. So the proposed garage and store, the subject of this application, is to be located north and forward of the main house, as shown by this grey rectangle here, shaded. Not only would the new garage be forward of the principal elevation of the main house, it's also separated from the ancillary accommodation, the former garage, by approximately 5 metres. So this slide shows the proposed design of the garage and store. It would measure 9.6 metres in length by 6.5 metres in width, with a ridge height of 2.9 metres, and is comprised of 3 parking spaces and 1 enclosed storage bay at the end. The proposed building is open on 3 sides, with the storage bay being enclosed. So this slide shows the floor plan with a store at the end. So this photograph is taken from the road, looking outside on the road into the site. It shows the location of the new garage, and it would be visible from the road in kind of this area. This is the proposed location of the garage and the store, approximately where the white car is. The picture is taken from halfway up the applicant's driveway. The location is currently open and separate from the existing built form. This is another view of the proposed location of the development. The picture is taken from the front door of the main house. You can see how far forward and separate it would be from the principal elevation of the main house. That's the end of the presentation. Mr. Chairman, there are no updates for this application, and the recommendation is that the application be refused for the 2 reasons detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Okay, we go to our first speaker, which is Councillor Corrine Elliott from, she's Vice Chairman of Snitterfield Parish Council, if you'd like to come forward. Hello, welcome. Right, so once you've made yourself comfortable, you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and if you'd remain seated for any questions at the end, press the button on the right so the microphone comes on, and I'll give you a warning at 30 seconds if that's all right. Okay, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. A previous successful application, 2002041 full, is relevant here, as under this application the existing garage was converted to a single-storey ancillary accommodation to provide suitable living space for elderly parents. This left the applicants without a garage, and as a result, an unsuccessful application 22000074 was made to construct a large garage, which the Parish Council did object to. At the request of the applicants, the Parish Council subsequently conducted a site visit to discuss the applicants' plans and to consider the Parish Council's concerns. Taking into account the Parish Council's concerns, this new application represents a significant improvement to the previous one. The length has actually been increased from 8.05 metres to 9.6 metres. However, the impact has been considerably lessened as the ridge height is reduced from 5.4 metres to 2.9 metres, the width from 9 metres to 6 metres, and the overall massing of the carport is reduced by 23 cubic metres. It is open-sided apart from the rear, where there is a secure storage unit. The structure will be subservient to the main dwelling and is clearly just a structure to shelter cars and provide secure storage. There has been much discussion on the location of the structure and whether it is within 5 metres of the main buildings. The LPA have determined that only the corner of the structure is within 5 metres of the main building. It must therefore principally be assessed on whether the structure affects the openness of the greenbelt, rather than under NDP B3, Neighbourhood Design Guidelines. Greenbelt legislation exists to ensure that the countryside is safeguarded from encroachment. The new carport is situated near to the main building and therefore is not encroaching into the large plot on which these buildings sit. The carport is not visible from the road when the main gates, you saw the picture, but when the main gates are closed, it's not visible, and it's not visible to neighbouring properties. The Parish Council there considers that there is limited harm to the openness of the greenbelt. The new carport, however, will protect the cars from overhead damage from trees and birds, provide secure storage and vehicle electric charging facilities, which the applicant has agreed to install. Special circumstances existed to convert the existing garage to provide suitable living space for elderly parents, and therefore a replacement by way of a carport is not unreasonable. However, if members agree to grant, the Parish Council requests that the installation of the electric charging point is made a condition of this application to mitigate any perceived harm to the greenbelt.
Well within your time, thank you very much. Any questions, please, from the committee? None at all, in that case. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. We can call our next speaker, Daniel Gidney, the applicant, please. Welcome again. Thank you for being so patient tonight. Same rules apply, so whenever you're ready, the button on the right is to start, and I'll give you a warning at 30 seconds, if that's okay. Whenever you're ready, over to you.
I'd like to thank the committee for giving me an opportunity to speak in support of the application for a timber open-sided carport. To provide some background, we were asked to withdraw this application, resubmit and apply for a legal certificate, including statutory declarations, to evidence that the proposed development, the land that it was on, was lawful, which we have done. I'd like to show that we have special circumstances to support this application and that there is no material harm to the greenbelt, as referenced by the officer's report with the use of the word modest. We were granted planning consent over 2 years ago to convert our single garage for social care reasons for our parents who are aged from late 70s to 91, one of whom is disabled, to enable them to have extended stays without having to use stairs and to have both buildings connected by a link. Since the pandemic, both sets of parents have spent and are spending more time with us at overnight stays as we provide them support and ultimately potentially live with us. Core Strategy 10 does identify potential exceptions for greenbelt development, which includes a small-scale development which meets a housing, employment or other need identified by the local community. This potentially could include social care. The consequence, though, of creating a social care space by converting our single garage, which, just to correct the officer, it hasn't been converted, it's still there, would be to lose storage and covered parking. This concerns us as we once suffered in the past from bird excrement, significantly damaging a car bonnet, and more recently, high wind, a tree fell onto my car, which took 2 people substantial time to clear before the car could be used to get to work. Please see photograph 4, as was sent through in advance. I think stop.
Pause for a second.
I have them here, but we did send them well in advance of the time.
Do you have, I'm going to ask, do we have any of that?
Who did you send them to?
The committee email that we were asked to send to them, they were sent on Saturday, which was well in time. I have one copy here.
All right, okay. Well, give us a second. We'll just see
Okay.
if we can find them. If they did arrive in the right time, then we'll be able to show them. It will take us a couple of moments to sort that out. Just bear with us.
Okay.
And I have paused your time, don't worry. Right, welcome back, everybody. Okay, we've now sorted all the presentations out and we're ready to start up. You have a total of you've had 1 minute 53, so you've got just over a minute left, 1 minute 10 seconds thereabouts, okay? I'll still give you the warning at 30 seconds just in case. All right, over to you.
So this was what I said about the photo 4 with the trees falling on my car. So after constructive advice from our ward councillor and parish council, we revised the application considerably to a very simple and more crucially open-sided timber kit. Please see the next photograph. The small carport is not a building in the traditional sense as referred to in the officer's report and could almost be perceived as a temporary structure in its visuality. Additionally, we are not overlooked at all by any neighbour or the public realm. And then you can bring up the next 2 photos, please. The application also commits us to environmental elements to soften the structure's features
30 seconds.
Appropriately to blend into its immediate surroundings to mitigate any harm to the greenbelt. This would include planting and using climbers around timber posts and structure. And we commit to adding a water butt and electric car charging point. The new simple structure is also within 5 metres of our existing building. The officer's report confirms the carport is a domestic adjunct and we believe should be considered a small-scale addition. My wife and I are not developers. We've lived in our home for over 15 years. And in summary, we'd like you to reflect on our special circumstances, providing support to elderly parents. We've listened and revised the plans accordingly. And we would ask you, thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. You're about 2 seconds over. I think we'll allow it. Okay. Right. Committee, do we have any questions? None? Not after all that. In that case, thank you very much for your time as well tonight. That means we go to our final speaker on this application, the ward member, Peter Richards. 5 minutes, sorry, apologies. You know the routine, you've got 5 minutes to speak on this. I'll give you a warning in the last 30 seconds, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, you've heard from both the applicant and the Parish Council now who have set out the merits of this proposal and why they think it should be granted. I'm in full support of their comments. You'll see on page 65 of your agenda pack that the case officer has detailed what is and what isn't inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. Specifically, he has stated that case law confirms that new outbuildings can be accepted as an extension to buildings provided that they form a normal domestic adjunct. He goes on to say that in the recent appeal decision, the inspector found that the carport and store could be considered to be a normal domestic adjunct, as such concluding that it should be judged as an extension to the existing dwelling. So in principle, therefore, the proposed carport can be considered an extension to the dwelling and would therefore not be an inappropriate development in the Greenbelt subject to its size and scale. So ultimately, this application hinges on whether the proposed carport is of small scale or not. I believe that it is. The original proposal, which was dismissed at appeal, was for a significantly larger carport with enclosed store and only open on 2 sides. The proposal before you now is a much reduced scheme with a lower pitch height and depth than the previous application. Great care has been given by the applicant to ensure that the proposal has limited to no impact on the openness of the Greenbelt. There is no definition of what is or isn't small scale in the NPPF or in our core strategy. Historically, a guide of 30% has been used for dwellings in the Greenbelt. However, this is a guide. It is not a hard and fast rule. Smithfield's NDP does state that extensions to buildings shall not normally exceed 30% of the volume of the building as it existed at the time the Greenbelt was established or when it was built, if later. The purpose of this policy is to prevent vast extensions to properties within the village, which, as you know, is covered by Greenbelt. The word normally allows for reasonable movement and common sense to be applied. In giving their full support to this application, I would assert that the Parish Council considers that this policy in their NDP has in fact been met. So when comparing other carports and garage extensions along Kings Lane to their host dwelling, and then comparing those to this proposal, I do not consider that this carport to be out of character or of such a scale that would be damaging to the Greenbelt, the street scene, or to warrant a refusal for its size and scale when compared to its own host dwelling. And finally, if I can address the second reason for refusal in your agenda pack, which is for insufficient detail for the climate checklist. I suspect this is an administrative issue that can be overcome. And so if you agree with my position on the principle and the size and scale of the proposed, you can move to grant subject to the satisfactory completion of the climate change checklist. And indeed, we have done that before, which you'll know from the application that we'll be hearing after this one. So with full parish council support, ward member support and no objections from neighbours or statutory consultees, I urge you to grant permission subject to the satisfactory completion of the climate checklist for the reasons I have set out. Thank you, Chairman.
Well within your 5 minutes. Any questions for the ward member, please? No? Relatively straightforward. Thank you very much, Councillor Richards. Okay, committee, points of clarification. Do we have any questions for the officers? Councillor Adam.
Thank you. The report notes that the existing house has been extended in increase approximately 80% in relation to the originally approved replacement cottage. What would the total increase be if considering this an extension as well, in terms of percentage, if you see what I mean?
So the total cumulative increase of the proposed development would be 125%. So the appeal that was just dismissed, the total cumulative increase of that previous proposal was 130%. So it's the newer, the more recent proposal is wider, but it's long. Sorry, it's, if you can, yeah, can you see on here? It's not as tall, but in terms of the new proposal is longer but narrower. So in terms of the cubic volume, the first application was 190 metres cubed, and the current application is 167 metres cubed. So it is a bit less, but it's not a huge amount less.
Any other questions or points of clarification? Okay, let's go to the debate. Who wants to kick us off? Councillor Mills.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. When I looked at this application, I thought, it's not, it looks okay to me, but then I thought, well, the applicant has created his own problem by taking away his garage, and then it bounces back that the reason he did this to look after his elderly in-laws or parents. I'll go back to my original thoughts. I can't see it causing a considerable harm. These constructions of these open garages are quite well used, and I think it fits in with the contents of with the house rather. So I'm at the moment thinking of going against the officer's recommendation, Mr. Chairman, but I'll see what everybody else has to say. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Adam? Over here.
My thoughts generally on the design are that it does seem to sort of fit, and there is no overwhelming harm, let's say. The thing that does concern me is in this case, somewhat incremental increase in the total amount of extension that the properties had, and 100. To the ward member's point, that that there's the guide being 30%, 125% isn't exactly within the same realm. So, generally speaking, I don't have a fundamental issue with the design. I do have an issue with that amount of increase being contrary to policy and being significant. I mean, I think some of the words the ward member used was that it's not a vast extension. It in and of itself isn't, but that total amount is the bit that worries me, which is why I asked. I'm a bit stuck there, I must admit, because design is one aspect of it, but whether in terms of solid planning reasons to go against the officer's recommendation, that's kind of what I'm coming up short against in light of that amount. That's my feeling at the moment. I won't make any proposition at the moment either.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Jennings next. Anybody?
Obviously, there are two reasons to go against this. I think the second reason can certainly be overcome by a condition. The first one, are there any special circumstances? Well, we don't need special circumstances if we regard it as small scale. Obviously, the inspector turned down a previous application, but again, we have to judge each application on its own merits. The previous application, I think the height of it would certainly be the issue with visibility. The fact that it's almost been halved in height makes me a lot more sympathetic towards it. I think you can sort of guess which way I'm going on this, that I'm kind of starting to think that this is small scale and therefore would be acceptable. But again, I'll let everyone else throw their 2 pence worth in.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Foreman.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Jennings. I am sympathetic with this application. The application that got refused, it's now been reduced in size. It's now open on 3 sides, not 2 as it was before. And I also think we can take into account the special circumstances, the parents and the in-laws. So I am going along the line of going against the officer at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Curtis.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm just agreeing with the last 2 speakers, really. Also, we have ward member and parish council support. It's where the gates are closed. It's not visible from the highway. I can't really see any material harm. So yes, thank you. I would probably go against the.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, looking at it, I don't have an issue with this. It's not tall, so it's not standing out in the countryside, and there is quite a large hedge behind it, so it's obscured. It's obscured from the road, so to me, it doesn't spoil the openness of the green belt. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right, no one's making a proposition, I'll do it. I'm in agreement with everything you've said so far. I find this to be, and by the way, I think the fact that the applicants have gone away, they've looked at this, have come back with a different application, one that is, I think, significantly smaller. I think that makes a huge difference to me. Significantly smaller. This is, I find it to be a very small scale development in the green belt, but nevertheless I find it to be very small scale. I don't think there'll be any harm to the street scene or to the setting and the openness of the green belt. Therefore, I will propose that we go against officer recommendation and grant this application. Do I have a seconder? Well, I think Councillor Jennings' hand was up first, but you spoke first. I'm going to go with that, Councillor Jennings, to second. Do you want to speak on it, Councillor Jennings?
I'm happy to second that, obviously subject to a climate change checklist.
Well, I would be happy with that as well. Does anybody else wish to speak on this at this point? Okay, I'll go to the officers. Emily, are you happy with what you've heard so far? Should I say, are you content with our reasons to go against officer recommendations, not are you happy?
From just to revert back to some of the comments the inspector made in the appeal, which is material, he says, however, and more significantly taking into account of the previous extensions at the property, the proposal would be around 130% larger than the original dwelling. So the inspector has considered that it's significant to consider the cumulative extensions. Obviously, that's material, but you can attach whatever weight you wish to attach to that. But I just wanted to draw reference to that comment within the appeal decision before you move forward with your vote. In terms of attaching a condition, that wouldn't necessarily be a problem. Would you want it as a condition for the climate change checklist to be submitted prior to commencement?
Yes.
In terms of your comments regarding the inspector's appraisal of this, so noted. Let's go to a vote, shall we? All those in favour of granting the application, please show. Oh, hold on. The rest of the conditions. Apologies. Put your hands back down.
Sorry.
Just go through the rest of the... We do need the standard set of conditions, don't we? Apologies. I'm out of practice.
Okay, just standard conditions, so a 3-year time limit for commencement, development to be carried, second condition, development development approved to be carried out in accordance with the submitted plans and drawings. And then another condition for external facing and roofing materials prior to use, I guess.
In accordance with, no, it's in accordance.
Oh yes, in accordance with.
That was in accordance with the approved drawings.
And then a fourth condition, carport and store hereby permitted shall only be used for parking and storage uses ancillary to the enjoyment of the main dwelling known as 9 The Hill, Primrose House. It shall not be used for any other use than to which the permission relates, and no separate curtilage shall be created. Plus and the fifth condition, climate change checklist prior to commencement.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I completely agree. I'm far too eager tonight. Okay, well, we're happy with the conditions, and Councillor Jennings, as the seconder, you're also happy? Okay. In that case, we can go to the vote. All those in favour of granting the application, please show. Those against and abstentions? 1. Thank you. Therefore, the committee resolves to grant application reference 23/00121/FUL, and I can thank
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Kendall, for that. We will move to our next item, which is application reference 22/01005/FUL. It's Corner Cottage, The Green in Snitterfield. Our presenting officer is Charlotte Dix. Charlotte, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the application site is within the centre of the village of Snitterfield. The application site is washed over by the West Midlands Greenbelt and is within the designated special landscape area. The property is also sited within flood zone 3. The application property is on a prominent corner location on the corner of the Green and Smith Lane. The property is entirely within the conservation area, which is denoted by the purple line. Here we have a photo showing the application property centrally within the photo, showing the prominent corner location. So this proposal is seeking full planning permission for the erection of a 2-storey front and side extension. Here on this slide we have the submitted existing and proposed front elevations with the proposed at the bottom of the screen. This would illustrate the property as viewed from the green to the front. This slide shows the existing and proposed elevational details, with the elevations as viewed from the garden on the left-hand side and from the drive elevation on the right-hand side. So the garden elevation is as would be seen from Smith Lane. Here we can see the existing and proposed floor plans. This includes details of the internal layout changes proposed. We've got the ground floor plans on the left-hand side with the first floor plans on the right-hand side. So this photo is taken stood from the front on the green, looking southwards towards the application property. The extension would be sited on the left-hand side of the screen. Here we're looking from School Road, looking southwestwards towards the property and the wider setting. The proposed extension would be sited in the gap centrally in the photo. Officers consider that the proposal fails to comply with the development plan, owing to the siting and the design of the proposed extensions and concerns relating to flooding. Members will remember that the item was deferred from the 21st of December 2022 committee to allow the submission of the information relating to flooding and climate change. Whilst the climate change information which has been submitted this week is acceptable, the flood risk assessment is not sufficient to assure officers that the development would be acceptable in flood risk terms. I refer you to the update within the update sheet relating to the information received this week and the updated recommendation. So the recommendation is to refuse the application based on reasons 1 and 3 as set out on pages 81 and 82 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's call our first speaker on this item, who is Councillor Corinne Elliott again. As usual, you'll have 3 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning before your time is up. When you're ready, the floor's yours.
Thank you, Chair. The Parish Council were very surprised to see this planning application listed for committee again. I actually presented at committee on 21st December 22, and the support was unanimous to grant the application. From what I remember, the issue of flooding was only flagged up on the night as a last-minute update by the planning officer, who had belatedly checked the online EA flood maps and had hastily ascertained the property being flood zone 3, high risk, and advised the committee accordingly. Unfortunately, since the major flood works on the culvert were completed in 2017, and this new culvert runs through the front garden of this property, the EA has still not updated these online maps. The LPA are aware of this. The Parish Council refers to the Planning Officer's Committee report on 20-02203-full Snitterfield Methodist Church, and I quote, "Drainage and flood risk, page 10. The site is located entirely within flood zone 1, lowest risk of flooding. Recent remodelling work by the EA shows the majority of the site is in flood zone 1. The information has not been updated on the EA's external maps, but has been confirmed by correspondence. Corner Cottage is directly opposite the Methodist Church. The Corner Cottage postcode is CV370JG. The Methodist Church is CV370JH. It is virtually in the same place. If you enter the Methodist Church postcode in the current online EA maps, as I did today, it still shows as high risk, which illustrates that, frustratingly, the online maps have not been updated in this area since the completion of the culvert. It is a pity that the LPA did not obtain correspondence from the EA regarding Corner Cottage instead of relying on the out-of-date EA maps. In addition, with our local knowledge, we are aware that this area is not flooded since the culvert was completed in 2017. There is also the fact that the extension is less than 250 metres squared, which means it falls into the low risk category of development as defined by the MPPF, even if it was in flood zone 3, which it isn't. This has been confirmed by correspondence dated 13th of April 23 from Stephen Locke Associates, Environmental and Planning Consultants, and recently sent to the LPA. On the basis of the above, the Parish Council considers that a flood risk assessment is not required and would involve the applicants in additional unnecessary expense. We understand that an acceptable updated climate change matrix has now been submitted to the LPA. It is disappointing and baffling that these matters could not have been dealt with between the applicants and the LPA rather than referring the whole application back to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do we have any questions for our Parish Council? No, I have one. You mentioned the planning reference number for the Methodist Church. I didn't quite catch it. Could you give it to me again, please?
Yes, it is, 02203/full. And I've also got a copy of the extract of the officer's report, which refers to that.
I will ask our planning manager to find that. She has a digital copy right in front of her, so we will. I think you might be having a point of clarification later on. So, thank you very much for your time and contribution this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, let's call our next speaker on the item, who is Lynn Wallace, on behalf of the applicant. Good evening, and thank you very much for your patience. And the same way as our previous speakers, you'll have 3 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning before your time is up. Otherwise, when you're seated, comfortable and ready to go, press the button on the right, and the floor is yours.
Good evening, everybody. Much of which I'm going to say has already been stated by Councillor Elliott, but just to reiterate, in the meeting last December, the committee voted unanimously to allow the small extension, which will accommodate a growing family safely by moving the stairs and an extra bedroom for the youngest. The family have lived there since 2002, so it's very much part of the village. It was, as Councillor Elliott said, added last minute at the planning meeting regarding the climate report and the flood risk report. The climate report has now been accepted. In the planning letter that was sent to the architect, it did not state a timescale for getting this information, and it has proved incredibly difficult to get any information from the Environment Agency, who say they have a major backlog due to COVID, but then the report, their map hasn't been updated since 2013. It was a surprise also to be relisted for a committee meeting, taking up valuable time of the committee members, and with the proposal to refuse. It surely would have been more prudent had the planning department contacted us direct to find out where we were up to, especially as they are aware that the Environment Agency have not updated the maps since 2013. The delay in updating the maps, and we could have explained to them how hard we had been trying to get all of this information. Even stranger that planning was granted for the Methodist Church opposite Corner Cottage. It was accepted by planning that due to the culvert work done in 2017, that the flood risk was now low. It states evidence was provided, but it's not available on the planning application, well, not that I could find. The planning department have now confirmed that the minor adjustments to the climate report were accepted, but despite a report from the expert flood consultant Stephen Locke stating the flood risk is now low, and under planning practice guidance national framework has detailed on page 48 of the framework that because the extension is less than 250 square metres, it is deemed to be very low risk category and that a full flood assessment is not required. The extensive work done to the culvert in 2017 at a cost of 2.7 million was done to remove the risk of flooding from the brook and the surface water to the village, and it has been a great success. In addition, Corner Cottage has now added a permeable driveway, a raised level so that the pavement is lower, as you could probably see in those pictures, and added a service drain. So I really hope the committee can take all of this into consideration and grant full planning.
Ms Wallace, thank you very much indeed. Members, do we have any questions for Ms Wallace? No? In that Councillor Mills does, please.
Thank you. On the flooding, did you say it's low risk now? Is it? Yeah. Can you put your microphone?
Ms Wallace, could you put your microphone on when you speak, please?
The flood report from the consultant says it was low risk, and also it's considered low risk because of the size of the extension and the fact that there's been no update since 2013 from the Environment Agency. And I have a picture here, but I didn't send it through, which shows the raised curb and the drain, so that the driveway is now a lot higher. And all of this is now permeable, so any surface water falling there would now drain through, and all of this has been done since 2017. So the flood risk listed is completely wrong, and it was accepted for the Methodist Church that it was now a flood risk 1, and Corner Cottage is literally opposite it, so it doesn't make sense.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else with any questions? No? Ms Wallace, thank you very much for your time and your patience this evening. Okay, we have no more speakers on this item. So, points of clarification. Could you please tell us whether... What? I was going first. I've lost my train of thought. Could you confirm whether we have indeed had confirmation from the EA that this is now flood risk 1, and I believe that confirmation is likely to be attached to the Methodist Church application?
Looking at the reports for the reference that was mentioned earlier on at the Methodist Church, it does state that the site is located almost entirely within flood zone 1, which is the lowest risk of flooding, and where development is considered acceptable in principle. And then it does go on to say that this information has not been updated on the EA's external maps at the time of writing this report, but has been confirmed to the LPA by correspondence, which is available on the application file. However, I can't see that information on the file to confirm that, but obviously as it's in the report, that would be the status of the application when it was considered by committee members before.
So my follow-up to that is how much weight can we give that, given the EA maps have not been updated? Have we sought an updated map from the EA, given the work that was done on the culvert?
I can't answer the question in terms of whether we have sought that information, but it would be based on the information that we've obviously got on this site. On our systems, it's still showing as being entirely within flood zone 3, which has got the highest probability of flooding. So, which is why obviously members considered the application before, and we asked for the information in terms of assessing that flood risk and assessing whether any mitigation measures would be required to assist in flood risk, making the flood risk acceptable on that site. We don't have anything in the confirmation from the applicants relating to the EA, so there's no confirmation via the applicants from the EA. So whilst it is noted in the letter that was received early this week on behalf of the applicants, we don't have any confirmation from the EA.
Have the EA been consulted on the letter you received earlier in the week?
We haven't carried out any consultation with the EA on the resubmitted information, no.
Understood, thank you. Councillor Jennings. Oh, hang on a second, Councillor Jennings. Yes, Emily.
In respect to consulting the Environment Agency on an application of this scale, it's very likely that if we did consult them, they would come back and say to refer to the standing advice. Because of applications of this scale, there's standing advice on the government's website in respect of dealing with applications like this of a sort of householder of this size.
Councillor Jennings, please.
The independent consultants report on the flooding, is that admissible as evidence?
Yes, so early this week we did receive a letter from the planning consultants acting on behalf of the applicant mentioning that the flood risk assessment the flood risk had been reduced because of the culverting on the site, but we haven't had any confirmation either from the EA or any of the documents to demonstrate this.
Councillor Adam, please.
Thank you. With regards to the flood map that you consulted, which showed it in flood zone 3, did that also include the adjacent chapel being within that same flood zone?
On the system that we work from, it clearly shows the application site entirely within flood zone 3, and it shows a small part of the Methodist Church site being within flood zone 3, but the majority is outside of the flood zone. So that the building itself is outside of the flood zone.
Any other points of clarification? No? Oh, Councillor Harvey?
Just a question of the statement of fact was made that I presume the Environment Agency has spent £2.7 million on a culvert. Do you know anything to contradict that?
I am the ward member, as you know, and yes, the EA did spend 2.7 million on the culverting. I mean, other than me telling you that, I have no specific evidence. I do have photos of me with the EA whilst they're putting the new pipes in. If you'd like to see me inside a pipe, I'll happily show you it.
I think that's going beyond the pale. But I do think it's clearly the issue is that the assessment of flood risk, and it seems to be that the officers are relying upon a map which hasn't been updated since 2013.
Understood. That is a point for debate, and we'll get into that in a second. I believe there is still a huge signpost on the corner directly opposite the application site that details the work that EA have done. Clearly we're not there, so we can't see it for ourselves, but certainly it has been, and I believe still is there. I think we might just go around the houses now because we have no definitive evidence that either I or anyone else can present. Did you want to say something, Emily?
I was just going to come in on the point that whilst it appears that the culvert works have been undertaken without confirmation from the Environment Agency about the level of benefit that has had in terms of reducing flood risk within the area, it would be very difficult to categorically confirm that it no longer falls within flood zone 3. So we would expect that from the Environment Agency to be able to give it that definitive.
Councillor Mills.
Thank you. What about the flood? When was the last time they had a major flood there that caused the problem with the housing? Do we know? Do we know? Okay. All right then. Do we know?
We don't have that information, I'm afraid.
Councillor Curtis.
Thanks, Chair. I understand that the Environment Agency hasn't confirmed that this now is flood risk 1, but have we actively sought that confirmation from the Environment Agency?
Following the application being heard by members in December, the case officer sought this information via the agent for the application numerous times, and in terms of the flood risk assessment, which would be informed by information sought from the Environment Agency.
But has the council or have officers actually gone directly to the Environment Agency to get that confirmation?
I can't confirm that the development management team have, but obviously there are other parties involved in establishing that information. So within our own service area, we haven't. But generally on applications like this, where this is a matter that's contested, it is usual that as part of the flood risk assessment, evidence to that effect is submitted by the applicants.
Councillor Jennings, please.
It was brought up earlier by the applicant, and it was about if the extension or the work was less than a certain site, then flood risk information was not needed. Could you just give me a bit of clarification on that?
Because the development is in flood zone 3, we would require a level of flood risk assessment of the application. The information that we would seek would be proportionate to the size of the extension and the size of the building works. But we would still require some assessment of the flood risk and whether it would exacerbate that flood risk and whether any mitigation measures would be required to make the development acceptable as a minimum.
Councillor Henry-Seraphim.
Yeah, thank you. This extension... Okay, this extension is built on the existing single-storey extension, isn't it?
Yes, so part of
the area is no greater than what's already there.
There's a 2-storey side extension as well. If I just show you the floor plans again. So if you can see the floor plan, so the existing ground floor plan is the plan at the top left of the screen.
That's all right, I was going off the description of the development over the existing single-storey extension.
Yes, and then there's a 2-storey side extension to the side of that. So where you can see here the dining room extension, and then above that bedroom 3 extension. So that would be projecting into the existing garden area. So where it's showing the kitchen projecting into and the bedroom here, that's where the existing single-storey extension is located, but there is a two-storey side extension for the dining room and bedroom to the side of that, so there is an additional footprint.
I was just thinking that the actual rainfall on the roof area.
Are you moving into
wouldn't be
debate
any
here?
greater.
Are you moving into debate here? Sorry, Councillor Henry-Seraphim. Okay, are there any more points of clarification before we go into the debate? And if there aren't, I might ask Councillor Henry-Seraphim to carry on what you're saying. No? Councillor Henry-Seraphim, would you like to start us off in debate? No? All right,
I'll let somebody else start.
I'll pick on someone else then. Who would like to kick us off? Councillor Mills.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, interesting one, isn't it? Right, I'll just kick off then. I haven't got any problems with this. I really haven't. It was only at the last minute. Last time it was to go back and look at it again. The flood risk assessment is a bit debatable at the moment, isn't it? Is it or isn't it a flood risk? There's a lot of work's gone into to stop a flood risk. So at the moment, Mr. Chairman, I'll listen to what everybody else says, but I've got a problem with it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mills. Councillor Adam, please.
Thank you. I mean, I remember this application from when it came in before. I think we went through it in some detail there, and clearly the main bone of contention tonight is the flooding. I think that the officers have clearly been diligent in going through the information that they've got. I'm based on the speakers who we've heard from, which is why we're all here at committee to hear from them. They've suggested that there's an update of information which supersedes what's being considered, and I think it's not unreasonable, therefore, to consider that particularly given the points that Councillor Henry-Seraphim was asking about in terms of increase in impermeable area, the risk to flooding is marginal, notwithstanding the requirement to investigate that, given the flood zone that we had. On that basis, I'd say that I'm very happy to go along with the grant, because again, that's the decision we looked at before, and I think the marginal impact that would be affecting flood risk is acceptable, and based on what we've heard, reduce the weight that's attached to that reason to refusal.
Just so I'm clear, did you propose grant then?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kendall, please.
This is debate, but I may need to have clarification as well. I want to find a way of granting this application. Like Councillor Adam, I can't see anything in common sense that would say this is in any way dangerous in terms of flood risk, in any way harmful to the setting. It is only a benefit. We need to find a way of doing this. This is where I'm going to come back to a little bit of maybe clarification, maybe legal clarification, I'm not sure. Given that we have got policy evidence in this report here that says this is flood zone 3, does that represent some sort of, if we were to grant, does that represent some sort of, I don't know what the right word is, reputational harm to the district council? Are we in some way liable if we do that? Even though we know that perhaps this flood zone is wrong. I want to know more about that before I can go any further with this.
There we go. I think rather than making an assumption based on what people may have said, I think we need to satisfy ourselves that it isn't in zone 3. And I think that's what you were really wanting to know.
That's precisely what I want to know. So I want to grant this for every reason that I've stated so far. I can't second you. What I'm about to say is something I really don't want to, but I'm going to have to propose we defer this again until we get the actual answer. Because I cannot just go with, they say this, they say that. I'm not satisfied this is correct. I really don't think it is, but I want to know before we go ahead and grant this that we're okay to do so. So I've got no reason, I've got no other choice but to say I propose we defer this application until we get proper information again.
Thank you, Councillor Kendall. Before calling any other speakers, I am going to second that. I desperately want to second Councillor Adam. We've made a decision on the principle. It was subject to the climate checklist and the flood satisfaction. As we've heard, the flood problem came in at the last minute. I believe it was on the update sheet. We're still no clearer neither our officers nor members, who are ultimately the decision makers, are clearer on whether it is or isn't flood zone 3 or flood zone 1. I think we need to go away, and it's an opportunity for both officers and for the applicant to get that information and be definitive of it. Can I clarify one thing? We obviously granted subject to the climate checklist and satisfactory flood information. By deferring this and getting that flood information definitively, if you're satisfied with it and it is flood zone 1, etc., 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 presumably it doesn't need to come back to us for a decision because we've already made that in principle decision and it is subject to that information coming forward. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it all depends on what your decision is. So ultimately the previous the previous decision that council has made was that it was approved or granted subject to the two matters, which was the climate change checklist and the flood risk being resolved. And you also listed, that decision included the relevant conditions. In that case, if you want to make that same recommendation subject to the removal of the climate change checklist because we're satisfied that that's been submitted, then that would fall to officers to delegate it once we were satisfied that flood risk information was acceptable.
Councillor Kendall, having made the proposal, are you comfortable with what has just been said?
So I'm clear. Then, so the previous grant subject to would go ahead in line with the flood zone being found to be flood zone 1, and in theory then it would be delegated as grant at that point. Am I correct? I'm sorry if I'm sounding like an idiot.
No,
I just want to make sure I get this right.
You are right to question that. So my understanding of it, just so we're clear, is that it is exactly the same proposal that we had on the previous application. So it is grants subject to satisfactory climate checklist. Now that can go away because we've had that. So now it will be subject to approved flood assessment. Now that flood assessment, as I understand it, would be confirmation from the EA that it is in whichever flood zone it's in, and if it's determined to be 1, minimal, therefore move to grant. If it's 3, the applicant's still required to provide the appropriate assessment to show that there would be no worsening of any flood effect there.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Now you've explained it. I now understand it. It's getting late at night. Do you want me to withdraw my proposal?
I'd like you to remake it along the lines of what was just said.
In that... Hang on.
Shall I do it?
No, because I'm conscious of the fact we've had a proposition to defer. We've had a proposition grant there. We need to keep it tidy, don't we? So, you know what I'm saying here?
Well, I mean, okay, I'm going to remove my seconding of yours,
and I will,
and therefore you can choose what you want to do.
And I will I'll remove my proposal as well. You something new. I'm happy. Go for it.
Marvellous. Bear with me now. This is getting awfully complicated over something that I consider to be quite straightforward. So, I'm going to propose that we grant, subject to receipt of further flooding details. Those flooding details obviously being confirmation from the Environmental Agency, and if it's flood zone 3, then confirmation from the applicant of the impact it's going to have. Councillor Adam, would you second me?
I'd be very happy to second.
That's very kind of you. Thank you ever so much. Councillor Jennings, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I don't know about flood. Is there such a thing as a flood risk 2? If there is, then we also need to incorporate that.
I think the officers have got the message that we just, all we need to do is tidy up the flood thing. We need to have definitive of what the impact it actually is, so what zone it's in, and if it's in a zone deemed to require any further assessment from the applicant is obliged to provide that. We're in no worse a situation than we were before, we're just going to get more information. So, The conditions are as they would have been previously, which are commencement in 3 years, in line with plans, materials, and actually that's it. The climate checklist is already done, and then obviously we've got the flood stuff. So, is everyone happy? Everyone understand what we're doing now? I'm glad you do. Are you satisfied that we have got to where we've got to?
Yes, and obviously as we're making a new recommendation, I will presume that the reason for overturning the officer's decision remains the same as those reasons that were considered last time.
Correct. Okay, let's have a... Another condition that I didn't say was compliance with the climate checklist, which is a standard condition. I think we're happy. We can move forward. Well, let's have a vote. The proposal is to grant, for the reasons previously set out, subject to the flood risk assessment. Can I have a show of hands for those in favour, please? That is unanimous. The committee therefore resolves to grant application 22-01005 FUL Corner Cottage, subject to. Do we have any urgent business? No, in that case, members of the public, thank you very much indeed for your efforts today. We will see you next week. Meeting's closed.
I'm just going to read the whole